served at the helm of various ministries in the Congress-led UPA government over the years, beginning with the Ministry of Science and Technology, then with the Ministry of Human Resource Development, followed by the Ministry of Communications and IT and Ministry of Law and Justice. Mr. Sibal was first nominated in July 1998 as a member of the upper house of the Indian Parliament, the Rajya Sabha, from the state of Bihar. He served as the Additional Solicitor General of India and President of the Supreme Court Bar Association on 3 occasions. In 2004 general elections, he won the Chandni Chowk constituency of the New Delhi with 71% vote share. It's an absolute honor, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Sibal, we all know that media is the fourth pillar of democracy.
Is it?
But nowadays, the kind of fighting that we see, it's much more than politics in the media. And the kind of role that media has is to tell the truth free from any bias. What's your reaction on it, sir?
Well, you must have first, there are two, three things in this conversation that you must understand in the context of what you're talking about. First of all, what is the truth? But that's a very sort of, it's very difficult to define the truth, because what is true, as I see it, it may not be true as you see it. So truth is not something that is something that is static, right? The nature of truth always changes. Why? Because new ways of looking at things, new data, new enlightenment. There are lots of things that actually ultimately result in what is true.
True.
Right? Sometimes you start with a proposition and you end up with the opposite proposition. Right? You start talking about a particular actor and you end up when you try to vilify a lady, and you end up saying, no, nothing happened. Actually, the lady was not responsible. Right? So that's one part of it. So truth is a very rare commodity, and everything depends on the eye of the beholder. Okay, absolutely. That's one. Number two, when you talk about the media, the nature of the media has completely changed over the years. Right? When we talked of the media way back at the time of independence, if you looked at people like Lajpat Rai, Mahatma Gandhi, Lokmanya Tilak, they used to run their own newspapers.
Yes.
They used to be editors of their papers. The papers used to be published by them through donations. Right? There was no commercial aspect. There was no industry worth the name. There was no commerce worth the name. There was no ads worth the name. Right? So there were no, therefore, other interests involved in disseminating opinions. Okay? That media is now completely transformed. Today, and that was free speech. Today it's been transformed to commercial speech.
Yes.
Right? So therefore, what are your TRPs? How you get more TRPs? Right?
How
what
you get more TRPs is something burning since yesterday.
And I'm not taking names that I don't want to get into issues that are controversial. But ultimately, the more TRPs you get, the more advertising revenue you get. The more advertising revenue you get, the more you want the TRPs to increase so that you get even more revenue. So it's all about commerce. It's all about earning money. That's one part of the media, right? And therefore, it's no longer the concept of free speech that dominates. It's the desire to earn more that dominates. And whatever therefore sells, right, whether it's true or it's not true, right, to try and sell it.
It's a commodity.
Because it earns you more money. So that's the second aspect that has completely changed. The third aspect is that media houses are now controlled by industry. Industry has vested interests in government. Media really survives through government revenues and government ads. Right? There are very few private ads which makes a particular media house self-sufficient. So if you are in industry, you have stakes in government, and you need government ads to run your media channels, that at some level there is an element of compromise that takes place. The more you please the government, the more happy the government is to give you ads. The more happy it is, the more you want to please the government, right? So it's a vicious circle. So therefore, somewhere down the road, what you call true gets compromised. So I think you have to look at media in this context, and I think we need to dismantle all this. You need to really dismantle all this if you want free speech to flourish in this country. And added is a fourth dimension, that's the social media. While in mainstream media and in the print media, you are still liable under certain laws. On the social media platforms, you're not liable at all.
Yes.
Because you are protected by anonymity, right? And you can say anything you want to say, whether it's true or it's untrue, and mostly you vilify people, you abuse people, right? And there is no recourse to the individual who is victimized. And we see that every day happening on the media. So, when you talked about the fourth pillar of democracy, it's a pillar that has actually dismantled itself. Those are my comments.
It has actually dismantled itself, and it has done its own death.
A little poem that I wrote on the media and on news. Let me just share that with you.
Absolutely,
I said the camera views.
I'm extremely sorry, there was some glitch at my end. I don't know.
No problem. I said the camera views with just one eye. The camera views with just one eye. I wish it could have two. Right?
Yes.
Along with it, a mind that helps to find out what is true.
Absolutely. So
when you look at things with one eye, right, and you don't look at things with two eyes, that means you don't look at both opinions before you really come to a conclusion. So you'll never find out what's true.
Absolutely right, sir. Mr. Sibal, you also recently mentioned in the media that the procedures that make our parliament, it is time to bid them farewell. Are you suggesting with this that our democracy has changed over the last 5 to 6 years?
No, I never said anywhere that we must bid farewell to our parliament. Of course not.
The procedures that make the parliament.
No. I said that what I said was that since we are not following any procedures, those in power are not following procedures, you might as well say farewell to them. I didn't say that parliament should say farewell.
The procedures that make the parliament.
Those who are in power, right, and who have majorities both in the Lok Sabha and can forge majorities in the Rajya Sabha, and they choose not to follow procedures, then the power structure, if it so sort of manages the House in a manner that it wishes to manage without following any procedure, then might as well the ruling party should forget about procedure. Not that Parliament should forget about procedure. Because they introduce bills whenever they want to introduce. They call a money bill, which is not a money bill. So they don't want a discussion and passing of the bill in the Rajya Sabha, right? Then they sort of suddenly spring a bill before us without circulating it. And then they have ordinances, don't refer it to select committees and standing committees, so that the discussion has to be done at that point in time and they are passed. And these which have enormous implications on the future of India, like, for example, the recent ordinances on farmers. They have, that's led to huge agitations in Punjab and Haryana. Now, all these very complex issues should actually be debated within committees to which they should be sent, whether they are select committees or standing committees. And then, of course, they come back to the House after consideration. And then, of course, it should be debated in the House. But if you want to pass bills like this, then the whole relevance of legislation is lost.
Somewhere the essence, you're saying that the essence of legislation is losing.
Absolutely.
Your recent such remarks have been criticized by the government heavily, and they believe that the opposition doesn't know how to respect the parliament. The opposition was weak in its attendance, and to top it up, your party leader was missing for the whole session. How do you react to it?
Well, first of all, let me respond in two particular ways. What do you mean by the opposition doesn't respect parliament? I mean, I would like to know from the treasury benches as they are today, that it is their leader in the Rajya Sabha who said that obstruction of the House is part of parliamentary practice. That's what their leader said when he was leader of the opposition.
Yes.
A very good friend of mine, no more today. But that's what he said, right? And look at the ways in which they paralyzed parliament when we were in power. We were not paralyzing parliament. We are saying, look, let's have a discussion. Refer these bills to the standing committee, refer these bills. And when we want, it's never happened in the history of parliament that the leader of the opposition's voice and his mic has been shut. He's not allowed to speak for as long as he wants to speak. There was a time when if the leader of the opposition got up, and I remember the days when Vajpayee ji was there, right? When he used to get up, there would be silence. Nobody would, the chairman or the speaker would never interrupt him. But today, they say, no, now you please finish. These are traditions of parliament that must be honored. Sentiments of the House are very important because the House represents the cosmos of India. It represents the colors of India. You have people from rural areas, you have people from different communities, you have people who are businessmen, you have people who are lawyers, there are people who are, who are farmers, there are people who are, so the entire, what should I say, the colors of the Republic of India are represented in the House.
It actually represents the diversity of this great nation.
That's why when you talk about different colors, you automatically talk about diversity.
Absolutely. So do you
now, if you want to paint the house in one color and you say it's my way or the highway, then you can't blame the opposition. Then you can't say the opposition doesn't want to follow procedure, the opposition is weak. The opposition may be weak because you have the numbers. The weaker the opposition, the greater respect to the opposition, according to me. Because you always respect the sentiments of the weak, because in any case, you can ride roughshod over them. At least listen to them, right? And the kind of majority they have in the lower house, in the Lok Sabha, and the kind of majority that they sort of are able to manage in the Rajya Sabha. So I'm afraid that this criticism and may I ask the Treasury benches that since 2014, has our dear Prime Minister ever answered a question in Parliament? They talk about absence of a leader, but ask him that for the 6 years, has he ever answered a question in Parliament? Is that part of the traditions of Parliament? Is that part of parliamentary democracy? It's that, remember, he kissed the floor of Parliament when he entered the House.
For the first time.
Right? Was it a kiss of death? Or was it that he committed himself to honor the traditions of the House? Parliament. And which Prime Minister in the history of the country has not answered questions? What we hear is only a monologue.
Since you mentioned about parliamentary democracy, sir, and since you're hinting the fact, are you hinting somewhere at the fact that democracy is under threat?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without any doubt, you see the pillars of democracy. Which are the pillars of democracy? One is Parliament. And we've seen how parliaments have been functioning and how debates are throttled.
Yes.
Or the voice of dissent is silenced. Then you have the executive, the second pillar of democracy. Now, the executive uses draconian laws to silence journalists, to silence thinkers, whether they are, authors of books or they are economists. Anybody who opposes this government is then trolled, right? And then they use draconian laws. If you oppose them, then the income tax comes after you. Then the ED gives you a notice. Then, of course, the CBI comes after you. And then cases are foisted on you. And then UAPA is included. The Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is used. Those draconian provisions are used to deny you bail. Young students are being targeted with UAPA. So the second pillar of authority that represents executive power, right, is also diminishing because the powerful, in fact, should persuade rather than exercise power. right?
Sure.
That's how, the powerful father in a house doesn't have to lord over everybody in the house. The house will break up. He has to listen to his children, right? So you have to listen to people in the republic.
Hmm.
You don't listen to, so that's what the executive is. The third pillar is judiciary,
Yes.
and the kind of judgments that we have seen in the recent past, and the kind of allegations that have been made,
Hmm.
the kind of procedures that have been adopted
Hmm.
are very disturbing, are very, very disturbing. And matters which are of great consequence are not heard.
Hmm.
So that's the third pillar of democracy. And about the fourth pillar, we started off our governance today
Started
with
off our discussion by saying that
the
whether
media,
and
which
you,
I've already. So if these are the four pillars of democracy, the answer to your question is, where is democracy? We are living in a my baap culture. जो मैं कहता हूं वो सही है.
true. Since you mentioned about the executive and about the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, do you feel that booking of the four individuals, including a journalist under the UAPA, is a way of shifting the attention from the pressing issue at hand in that state?
In which democracy do you have a situation where the victim becomes the accused and the perpetrators of crime become the victims? Right? And we've seen it in so many cases, whether it's Akhlaq or the rape in Unnao or the lynching in Unnao, right? And, somebody trading, is suddenly lynched, right? And then cases are foisted on them. This is what is happening. See the kind of demonstrations that happened in Kathua, in Kashmir, in Jammu, when that young girl was raped, right? And the investigating agencies always seem to be taking the side of the accused. Many a time this happens. I mean, in which country at 2:30 in the morning, without informing the family, you will, cremate the girl? In which country? Where does this happen? That the family will have no access to the media? In which country does this happen? So these are very serious fault lines in the manner in which our democracy is functioning. And therefore, the use of these draconian laws makes freedom of speech the victim, make democratic values the victim.
Yes. Now, Mr. Sibal, if we talk about the three bills related to the farmers' issue that were passed by the parliament, and now with the president's assent, they all have become laws. They are hailed as a transformational piece of legislation for the farmers, and the government has termed it pro-farmer. But as you mentioned earlier, there are nationwide protests happening, and one of BJP's old ally has distanced itself from them, from the NDA. Where do you see this finally going?
Well, ultimately, there's a larger constitutional issue that has to be discussed. The larger constitutional issue is, does the center have the power at all to deal with agriculture? Agriculture is in the state list, right? So this is in fact subversion of federalism. How the farm produce is to be distributed, in what manner it is to be distributed, which should be decided by state governments, right? But that apart, when the government talks about transformative legislation, right? Remember, they said the same thing when they imposed demonetization. They said this is transformative. We'll get rid of terrorism. We'll get rid of cash currencies and cash transactions, right? We'll get rid of
parallel economy that was running.
All that has happened, right? That was also transformative. What happened? And remember, the Prime Minister said at that point in time, if I remember correctly, that you just give me 50 days and everything will be resolved. And the downturn of the Indian economy started with 2016. 8th November 2016 was the beginning of the downturn of the economy, right? Then what did he say thereafter? The GST was transformative. What happened to the GST? Not enough revenue, right? You can't pay the states. Then you're telling the states now to borrow. What they owe is 2,35,000 crores. And they say, you borrow, we'll give you part of it, but the rest you borrow. You borrow 1,35,000 crores. The states themselves are in great difficulty because they have no space to borrow. The center is not willing to borrow. So that was also transformative. So it's all very well to say that something is transformative. You say it because you believe it is transformative and you impose those decisions without thinking through. Did they know at that point in time what was going to happen in Punjab and Haryana? Because remember, in other states in India, procurement doesn't take place, rather in marginal. Right? The other two states where procurement does take place at the marginal way is Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh. But the major procurement states are Punjab and Haryana. Right? And the granaries are full. Right? The state also in the mandis imposes certain tax. And remember the other thing, and remember about 27 to 30%, even when procurement is done, even when the bills were not there, only 27 to 30% of the produce came to the mandis. The rest was all sold privately. Now they are allowing contract farming.
Yes.
Now, when you allow contract farming, naturally they will see in a contract there are two parties. One party here is a farmer who has less than a hectare of land. The other party is the big corporation, which then enters into a contract with him. Where's the level playing field? What will the poor farmer do if the contract is breached? Where will he go? As it is, he lives from hand to mouth. As it is, he's a marginal farmer.
Where does he address his grievances?
Exactly. What's going to happen? And he will, of course, naturally, the private player in the market is going to tell him that, look, you give me all this, and remember, in the Artiya system, there was a kind of a social cushion, because the Artiyas would give the farmer when he needed, say, to marry somebody in the family, right? In difficult times, he would need money, and the Artiya would help him in those times, and in return would take his produce, right? So that social relationship has also been sort of impacted. So while I do not have the prism to find out as to what's going to happen tomorrow, but I do feel that if you say that it's transformative, you haven't thought it through. Right? The states which depend on farmers heavily, and which are farm producing states, are, especially of paddy and rice and wheat, are the states Punjab and Haryana, where the maximum procurement. And if they are upset and they are agitating in a big way, obviously there is something amiss, something right you haven't done.
Something fundamentally needs to be thought about, you feel.
That's correct. And if you had referred this to the standing committee or the select committee, part of the problem would have been resolved.
It requires a more deeper thought and deliberations.
Absolutely.
Mr. Sibal, currently as a nation, we are also battling a face-off with China at the borders. The government has said that it has done enough and a lot of de-escalation has happened. Do you feel that the government has done enough to address such a mammoth concern of our borders?
On matters like this, we must stand with the country. We must stand with the nation.
Yes.
I don't think that this is the time to start criticizing. We can criticize the government for its statements, but we laud the bravery of our soldiers.
Yes.
And the manner in which they have fought back, given the difficult circumstances in which they are placed. That the Chinese are aggressors, there is no doubt. That the Chinese have occupied territories, now saying that they only believe in the 1959 boundary, and therefore they're not going to accept anything after that, which means they don't accept all the negotiations that are taking place on the line of actual control. So Chinese are aggressors. The Chinese are trying to show their strength. And the Indian soldier is fighting very bravely. Uh, so we stand with the Indian soldier, we stand with the army, we stand with our defense services. And I only wish that the Prime Minister had not made that statement that he did, that no part of our territory has been occupied.
So it is a time that we need to stand with our soldiers, and it's best that we keep it less political in that aspect.
That's good.
Mr. Sibal, we also know that we have been facing a pandemic since the past now 6 to 7 months, and it has gripped the entire world, and India now stands second most affected nation with a surge in the count of daily cases.
Right.
Congress went on record saying that the government has not done enough, whereas the government in the parliament, the union minister has said that if the lockdown was not imposed, then we would have more number of cases. But the opposition went on saying that that was a very draconian step, the most draconian lockdown that any country could have ever seen. On one hand, we have the slowing economy, we have job losses. How do you react to this situation? What is your take on it?
See, first of all, as far as this pandemic is concerned, we don't know where it will go. Right? We have now over 100,000 people who have died in India.
Yes.
Right? And the total number of people who have died of this pandemic all over the world is 1 million.
Close to 1 million, yes.
Correct? So 1/10 of the deaths have taken place in India. And these are disclosed numbers. And I dare say there will be undisclosed numbers that we're not aware about. Because the cause of each death is determined by what is found out. And there are many deaths that we will know, which had everything to do with the pandemic and with the corona, but it would not be recorded. So be that as it may, these are frightening numbers. Right? And when it will be over, we don't know. When the vaccine will come, we don't know. Whether they have done a good job or a bad job, I think that let's leave that for the moment. Right? But the more important issue is that why was it that on March 24, the Prime Minister announced, right, that after 12 o'clock or whatever, there'll be no movement. You see, you don't give people notice. People lost their jobs. Many of them stay in rental accommodation. They have no money to pay the rent. They have no accumulated savings. The government never thought of what would happen to them.
They showed the migrant laborers.
Yes, that's precisely the point I'm coming to. They never thought what would happen to them. Again, something that you said was necessary, and what does it result in? Thousands of people walking thousands of hundreds of kilometers. I mean, the kind of tragic stories that we witnessed, we read about, we witnessed on television are heartbreaking. It's that what I'm critical of. Nobody can control this pandemic. You can have two opinions about it. But again, a thoughtless decision without thinking through as to what is going to be the impact of this. And remember, a law officer of the court said, there's nobody on the street. When Supreme Court was told, a law officer said, no, there's everything. There's nobody on the street. And people were walking hundreds of kilometers. Courts didn't take up the matter. And we didn't know which train was going when. We didn't know how people were. And then the shelter homes, what was provided in those shelter homes? In fact, it's civil society that helped those migrants much more than the government. And then, of course, you have the problem about those who were dealing with the pandemic, the nurses, the doctors, right, and the equipment that was necessary to protect them. That was not available. We didn't have enough, oxygen. So all that is fine because it is something that happened suddenly. But I am critical of the decision that was taken on March 24. And why wait till March 24 when you know that the WHO itself has said way back in January, the end of January. This is a pandemic. Why wait till March 24? And it's on March 24 that the government in Madhya Pradesh fell, because that conflict was going on between the BJP and the Congress party in court. And it's when that decision was resolved on March 24 evening, that on March 24 evening itself, the Prime Minister made that speech. That also is worrisome. This should have been done much earlier.
It was, as you're saying, that there was some kind of timing involved in it.
Well, I've stated the facts and the conclusions are yours. And again, we go back to what is true and what is not true. Depends on the eye of the beholder.
Very subjective.
Yes.
Mr. Sibal, the government announced its Atmanirbhar package, close to about 20 lakh crores, which is roughly 90 to 97% of the government's total receipts, to salvage a falling economy. Our dismal GDP numbers is a testimony to that our economy is falling. How do you react to this Atmanirbhar package? Do you believe that it will ingest that kind of confidence in the veins of our economy?
It has not. It has not. In fact, all economists around the world and in India say that this Atmanirbhar package was no package at all. It only represented 2% of GDP. The rest was only the possibility and the freedom given to the banks to defray credit, to give credit to people. But nobody was willing to take credit. So what was this Atmanirbhar package? There's no package at all. It's yet another jumla. Where was this package? Other countries.
A lot of packages were given to the MSME. A lot of relief was given to them.
Sorry?
A lot of relief was given to the MSME so that they stand back on
relief? The SMMEs could take credit, but who is willing to take credit when the economy was at a standstill? Remember, you take money if the economy is growing or the economy is functioning on the ground. But if you are not manufacturing, right? If your car sales are down, your manufacturing activity is down, your construction industry is at a standstill, right? Your housing industry is at a standstill, your hotel industry is at a standstill, your tourism at a standstill,
aviation,
right? And if you cannot sell goods around the world because there is no demand around the world, what are you going to take the credit for? Which MSME will come to the bank and say, give me credit, even though the government said you can take credit. And therefore, all economists have agreed that what this package only represented 2% of GDP, which is much less than many countries.
A lot of the West countries.
In a country like the United States with trillions of dollars of GDP, gave 10% of GDP. Japan, I think, gave more than 20%, or even more, I think 24, 25%. I don't have the exact figure.
But we have a huge fiscal deficit.
People in America were being paid money for not working. In fact, more than the employment dole that they were getting. They were paid more because they were being confronted with this problem. And that's why in the last quarter, the economy went down by 24%. GDP went down by 24%. And in fact, just this morning, the World Bank has said that our GDP growth this year will be minus 9.4%. It fall down by 9.4%.
Close to negative 10%.
Yes, that's what it is. That's where we are. So and if you want Atmanirbharta, why are you getting Rafales from France? Then you should have allowed the HAL factory to build Rafales. Where's the transfer of technology? Where are the offsets? Everything you want from outside. I mean, which part of the economy is flourishing today? The IT sector, right? Yes. The Amazon, the
e-commerce, FMCG.
E-commerce, right? Is that Atmanirbharta? These are all foreign players who are supplying goods to all of us. Which is that Atmanirbharta you're talking about? I mean, again, it's another phrase. Every other week you have a new phrase.
So Atmanirbharta, according to you, has not injected or has not been implemented in the true sense as it should have been.
When has it ever been implemented by this government? What does Atmanirbharta mean? Please tell me. Your cars are all manufactured, right? All the cars that are manufactured are foreign players in this country, right? In the
Make in India.
Once in the telecom sector, for example, there's not one manufacturing item in India Everything is borrowed. Everything is imported. Your routers, your other equipment, they're all imported. Who does the manufacturing? Is the Chinese companies are manufacturing Chinese phones in India? Is that Atmanirbharta?
200 Chinese apps were banned.
Oh, that's good. That's not Atmanirbharta. That is tit for tat.
More of a diplomatic move or an answer.
Whatever it is, good thing. I mean, I think that the Chinese need to be taught a lesson. Nothing wrong with that.
Mr. Sibal, I'll come towards my last question. The Congress party today, and we all know, and the public at large knows, that it faces profound challenges on multiple fronts, and that a complete rejuvenation is needed if it has to smell victory in 2024. Do you see that steps have been taken towards it?
I think we are all in the Congress party willing to, speak up and say that, look, there is a challenge in 2024, and the Congress party needs to rejuvenate, and that's why 23 of us signed that letter. And we hope that the party leadership will recognize our concerns, because our concern is to strengthen the Congress party, because that's the only national alternative we have. And I don't want to voice these concerns in the public so much, because I don't think that I should do that. But we have expressed our concerns, and we will continue to press the concerns we have. And we will continue to want a transformation of the party to make it a real force to be reckoned with in the opposition, and to be the national alternative, which should challenge the BJP in the next election in 2024.
Do you feel that challenging, more than challenging the BJP, now since we have seen 2014 and more in 2019, it was more of a presidential form of an election?
Well, yes, that's something that, again, it requires attention by the Congress party.
Yes, so you believe that the Congress is working towards it and positive for 2024?
I hope so.
You hope so?
I would want so. I would want so. I hope so.
Naturally, you want it so.
And we are committed. We are committed to meet that challenge. We are congressmen.
Sure. With this, Mr. Sibal, thank you so much for joining on this episode of Visionary Talks by Governance Now. It was an absolute pleasure and honor of having you today, this evening. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining on this episode of Visionary Talks. Thank you so much, Mr. Sibal, for discussing a wide variety of issues. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure was mine. Pleasure was mine. Namaskar.
Thank you.